your host, Mimosa,
and co-host Kareem.
Welcome to Sometimes We're Bougie and Sometimes We Hood, to healing, navigating grief. It's a podcast dedicated to exploring the complex emotions of loss, the road to healing, and the strength found in remembrance. Welcome in, everybody. How you doing? It is Auntie Mimosa here. Oh, waiting on Cousin Kareem. I hope everybody's doing good. So, hey there, TikTok fam, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Hello. I'm waiting on Cousin Kareem. Yes. So today's topic is really going to be heavy. Not that they are not heavy as it is, but yeah, this one is going to be pretty intense. Pretty intense. So while I am waiting on Cousin Kareem to get in here, and I'm hoping, yeah, today's much better. And I tried to put my background up, but it is what it is. So with that being said, we're gonna jump right on in here while Cousin Kareem is getting ready to come on. What if I told you that getting housed can sometimes feel like a loss? Yes, I said that. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. And so, and I don't know if you've watched previous shows. However, Cousin Kareem and I made the statement that we talk about grief from the perspective of things that we experience. And we cover or talk about grief, not just from loss of loved ones, but loss of pets, financial loss, grieving as a caregiver, grieving yourself by injury, grieving yourself as you age because you no longer, are able to do the things that you used to do. And so we talk about grief from relocation, grief from starting a new job, ending a job. So we cover and talk about grief in everything. But this topic here today is about grief of the homeless becoming housed. Now, most people would think, well, if I'm homeless and someone puts me in a house, then I should be happy and I should be grateful about being in a house. Well, that is not always the case when it comes to the homeless and being housed, and they experience grief as well. So this might make some people uncomfortable today. And that is what Cousin Kareem and I do. We make people uncomfortable. Okay. We make society uncomfortable with this conversation and with the conversations that we have. So, with that being said, welcome back to Sometimes We Bougie, Sometimes We Hood. I'm your host, Auntie Mimosa. I think Cousin Kareem is having some technical difficulties over there in Hawaii, but he'll be in shortly. And today we're having a conversation again. Like I said, that might make some people uncomfortable because we're going to talk about grief not after transition, not after divorce, and not after diagnosis, but grief after getting housed. Yes, you heard that right. What if I told you that for some people, receiving an apartment key feels less like a celebration and more like a loss? Think about that. What if I told you that stability can feel destabilizing, right? That silence can feel loud. That four walls can feel more isolating than the street corner somebody once called home. So today we're talking about the grief that no one prepares people for when they transition from homelessness into housing. Because housing is it's a structural solution, but home is an emotional experience. And when someone has survived outside, built community outside, found identity outside, and created routines outside, right? And now being placed inside, right, can feel like displacement. We don't talk enough about that. Cousin Kareem, are you in? I don't have a visual of you, but are you in? Are you here? Okay. We don't talk enough about that. We celebrate housing numbers, we track placements, we measure retention rates, right? But we don't always make space for the emotional transition. And here's what I know, both professionally and personally. There he goes. Grief is not just about transition. Grief is a significant change that alters your sense of safety, belonging, identity, or control. And when someone moves from the streets into an apartment, they may be grieving or they may experience grief, the loss of community, the loss of survival identity, the loss of daily connection, the loss of predictability, even the loss of familiar chaos. Sometimes healing feels more threatening than surviving. Sometimes quiet feels lonelier than noise. And sometimes stability feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliarity feels unsafe, right? What's good, cousin Kareem? Welcome in. How you doing? Can you hear me? I don't know if he can hear me or not, but okay. So, and with that being said, if we are going to talk about like
I'm doing
how,
better now.
oh, there
I can
you
hear you.
go. Okay, there we
Yeah, it was
go.
going in and out.
Yes. Okay. So
Yeah.
you got the glitch going on this time. But welcome to Sometimes We Bougie. Oh, he's
Sometimes we
glitching.
good.
There we go.
Hey,
And of course, I'm Auntie Mimosa.
yeah, there we go.
And
Hey, this is
that
cousin Kareem.
good deal.
Yes, it's good.
Good. And with that being said, everything else, welcome in, everybody. So with that being said, you know, when we're talking about housing stabilization, like in a real way, especially here in Atlanta and in communities across this country, we have to talk about the emotional weight of the transition. Now, you probably like, where is this coming from? Right. And, Auntie Mimosa is always transparent about where she's coming from. So I started new employment and and I'm naming my company. I usually don't, but I'm doing this for a reason. And it's with Hope Atlanta. And we are with Hope Atlanta. It is a nonprofit agency. And my role as a case manager is to help the homeless individuals that are housed to become stable. That is my role. Hope Atlanta does assist with the homeless as far as housing along, and then there's a major project going on called Project Home. And of course, at the end, I'll provide resources. So you all, and these resources for the Atlanta area. Okay. But back to what I'm talking about, because being like, some people would say like being able to have a home is great, yes. However, forced housing without emotional preparation can feel like forced identity change, right? So today we're holding space for that person who misses the street family. They didn't choose but deeply loved, right? That community. We're holding we're holding space for that person who sits in an empty unit or apartment and wonders why they feel sad instead of grateful. We're holding space for that, for the case managers and therapists like myself who see their clients struggle but don't always have language for what's happening and don't understand what's happening with them. So this conversation is not about discouraging housing, that's number one. It's about humanizing transition, because stabilization is not just financial, it's emotional, it's relational, it's psychological, and it deserves compassion. So, like I said, take a deep breath with me as we always do. Settle in, and
You
let's talk about the grief
guys
of becoming
repeat
house.
that is breaking up.
Right? Yeah, you still coming in choppy as always, cousin Kareem. We got to figure out what's going on over there in Hawaii with that internet. Okay, so like I said, let's dive in with this. So grief is not just about the loss of your loved ones, right, or the loss of a pet, or like as we said, it's not about financial loss, relationships, injury. Yourself grieving yourself. We have been conditioned to think grief only shows up at memorial services and funerals, right? But grief is any significant change that alters your sense of safety, your sense of belonging, your identity, your daily rhythm, and your survival system. When someone transitions, right, from homelessness into housing, people celebrate the outcome, right? But they rarely acknowledge the internal shift that individual is going through. Because homelessness, as painful as it could be, often creates structure in unexpected ways, right? And when housing happens quickly, especially in rapid rehousing or mandated placements, right? The emotional system doesn't always transition at the same speed as the housing placement. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, TikTok fam, for joining us. Thank you, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook fam. Thank you for joining us. So let's unpack that, right? Let's unpack that. I know I said a lot, but let's unpack that. Homelessness often creates what? Cousin Kareem, what do you think?
Fear, fear of security, fear of just being, having your own space,
Okay.
and not having it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just not knowing where your stuff is
Mm-hmm.
at any particular time or where it's
Right.
going to be.
Okay.
You know,
So
I think those are like the two biggest factors.
that's what you think, right? That's what you're thinking. So what about
Yeah.
community? What about community? Like on the streets, in the shelters, under bridge, in encampments, under overpasses, that people form these bonds, tent communities, right?
Yeah.
It's a shared struggle created and a
That
shared
level of
identity
trust. Yeah.
created. Right. So they know each other's name. They notice when somebody's missing. They share food. They watch each other's belongings, and they protect one another. Right. There is often
Yeah.
like it's a street family, and it's not biological, but it's the bond they have to one another through survival and being resilient. Right. So when housing happens, that community can disappear overnight. No more daily check ins from your community. no more shared meals from your community, and like no more familiar faces, right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're alone in your apartment, right? Welcome in, welcome in. Suddenly you're alone in your apartment. And that can feel like abandonment, even if the apartment is technically safer for you. Okay. So, again, those of you who are just joining us, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, we're talking about the grief that the homeless feel when they are transitioning into housing, and the sense what's lost there, their sense of identity, community, family bond, sharing of food, that all of that takes place that we don't think about when we think about the homeless. Okay. And the same thing, like with when it comes to the homeless college students, right? So I bring up homeless college students because um BBR, which is Butterby Rocka, she has a nonprofit called, oh, excuse me. She has a nonprofit called Artists Rock the Mic, and I work with that nonprofit organization as well. And that organization's focus is on homeless college students. Now, most people would say, how in the world can college students be homeless? Because maybe their financial aid didn't cover their financial aid didn't cover their housing, or they did not have enough money to pay for housing. So what they do is they couch hop from friend to friend to friend, or relative while they go to school during the day. And Butterby Rocker, she is the founder of Artists with an S Rocks the Mic. She provides resources to homeless college students. Okay. And like I said, my job as a case manager for Hope Atlanta, is to assist and provide stability, stabilization, and work with the clients that I work with to heal the emotional stress of grief that they may be experiencing because they have left their community, their homeless community, right? So let's talk about predictability. Okay. And this surprises people. This right here, predictability surprises people. You would think that, oh, if they're homeless, that they're not predictable. Wrong. But even chaos has a routine. Chaos has a routine. Cousin Kareem, what do you think the predictability of someone who's homeless may have?
What do you mean by that? Like the predictability? You mean like as far as their daily activities are,
Right.
or
Right. Their routine. What do you think their routine might be?
uh,
Because they
one
have a
time,
routine.
or
So with that, right. So with that, so like I said, even chaos has a routine.
yeah,
Where they sleep, when food is served, where outreach is, when and where outreach workers come, who shows up every night, and which corner feels the safest.
yeah, just
That's
try to stay in the flow.
right. Right. That's the predictability when it comes to the homeless. Like the nervous systems adapts to patterns, even difficult and hard ones. Housing disrupts that rhythm. New neighborhood, new neighbors, new expectations, new rules, new responsibilities. So the predictability they have, it shifts, and the body can interpret that shift as danger, even if they are housed safely. And most people be like, that's insane. They would be like, why would they feel in danger in a house, or in not a house, but in an apartment? They should feel safe. They should feel grateful. but they were taken or convinced to come out of their homeless community into an apartment, and those same that individuals that are in that homeless community, that homeless family, they might have a somebody they call grandma. They might have somebody they call auntie. They might have somebody they call mom. They might have somebody they call uncle. Now you've taken them away from that, and that disrupts the predictability. You may have organizations that go out on every Tuesday and they bring snacks and food and clothes to them every Tuesday. Now they're missing out on that, right? They're missing that. You may have another organization that comes out every Saturday with, it sets up and feeds them hot meals. And they look forward to that. So when they're moved from that community into an apartment or a housing apartments where specifically for now they're new faces. They may not even see the same faces of their community. Now they have to get to learn new people. Now they have to develop a whole new routine. Now for us, we thinking like, wow, that shouldn't be a struggle. They should be happy. But it's the same for us when we relocate. When we relocate to a new home, you got to put your stuff together. You got to put your home back together. If your route to work is now different, you now have to adjust to your new route to work with relocation grief. When you move to a new job, right? Or you go to and start a new job, there's some grief there because now you have new people, you have to new coworkers, you have to learn new routine, you have to learn new systems, you have to learn in order to do your job. So when you take those same concepts and apply them to the homeless, apply those to the homeless. They have what's called a street family, and a street family isn't just friendship. I'm going to say it again. They have a street family, and the street family is not just friendship. It's protection. It's belonging. It's shared trauma bonding, because a lot of homeless individuals, they have some type of trauma, whether it's a homeless veteran, whether it's someone with mental illness, whether it's a male or female escaping or fleeing domestic abuse and domestic violence. Welcome in. It's trauma bonding, shared trauma bonding. And when someone leaves that environment, they feel guilt for leaving others behind. They may worry about those that are still outside in that family, and they may miss the intimacy of shared hardships because there's conversations, they communicate, they talk. And that grief can show up as loneliness, survivor's guilt, emotional numbness, and no one prepares them for that. However, with my individuals that I work with, that's my role. That is the role that I will take on with them in doing my job, is preparing them for the loneliness, the survivor's guilt, the emotional numbness, and for them to talk. And that's the role of the therapist, to talk to them about these things. But sometimes it will take an outside individual like myself to bring this up. Hey, talk about the grief, talk about the loneliness, talk about survivor's guilt, or what they call survivor's remorse, right? Talk about your emotional numbness, talk about your street family. What made them a street family? Talk about how you miss them. Talk about the belonging. Talk about the familiarity with them, and how there is now this new shift. There's a change in your life now. Talk about that. And I'm saying that like when you TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube family, if you take on, or if that's something you do, you feed the homeless, talk to them about that. even in talk to them about their community, talk to them about their street family, get to know them, talk about that. Ask them if anybody is housed or homed. How do they feel about that? Talk about that awareness, right? Talk about it. Because again, no one prepares them for that. And like you said, there's what they call survivor's guilt or survivor's remorse, right? It's like that one person that survives the plane crash. Why me? Right? That's what that is. So, and with that, all right, welcome to Sometimes We Bougie, Sometimes We Hood. Cousin Kareem and I. Today's topic is grieving the streets. Grieving the streets, right? When housing doesn't feel like home. That's the topic. That's today's topic. And we're talking about the stabilization of homeless individuals. And we just talked about the fact that, grief is not always just about transition. You know, it's it significantly changes and alters your sense of safety, sense of belonging, your identity, daily rhythm, your survival system. We talked about homelessness often creating community and predictability. That's what we are, and creating a street family. So, with that, Cousin Kareem, what are your thoughts so far? What are you thinking when it comes to like the homeless individuals experiencing grief from being housed? Oh my goodness, Cousin Kareem is like in and out today. He's just bouncing, 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 but it's all right. Survival. I'm gonna talk about survival identity, right? When someone survives homelessness, they build a survival self, right? That identity includes being resourceful, because they are, being alert, being strong, being protective, and being hyper independent. That survival identity is powerful. It is high, that is extremely powerful. And I'm going to say that again. When someone survives homelessness, they build a survival self. Like we all have a survival self that's resourceful, alert, strong, protective, hyper independent, right? And that survival identity is very powerful. But when someone moves into housing, that identity is no longer needed in the same way. It shifts, right? And if your identity has been built around surviving, what happens when you are no longer in survival mode? What do you think happens, Cousin Kareem?
You try to figure out that next move. You try to figure out how to live again. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
complicated condition. Because if you, depending on how long you've been in that survivor mode, some people struggle where they just stay small. It happened to his aunt. She was homeless for about a year and a half after getting off of drugs. And
Mm-hmm.
way that she went into living in a place that we helped her get to a 2-floor, 2-bedroom apartment, townhouse, and
Mm-hmm.
she couldn't really adapt to that living situation.
Right.
She didn't know how to
Okay.
sometimes.
Right. So, and with that, people feel useless, right? They feel restless.
It's very difficult to accomplish or to put repertoire of what you should things just going to survive.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's the
They,
hardest
they
part,
feel right.
is really
Okay.
trying to catch past.
I lost cousin Cream again. All right. So, what happens when like a homeless individual is no longer in survival mode? Sometimes they feel useless. They feel restless. They're uncertain about who they are, and they become disconnected from their strength, their survival strength. So, now imagine someone who goes through trauma or who continuously operates in survival mode continuously. And I'm not, and this I'm gonna switch gears a little bit, but not just somebody who's homeless, but imagine someone who consistently operates in survival mode, and then once they learn to come out of survival mode, they feel useless, they feel restless, they feel uncertain about who they are, their whole identity changes, and they disconnect from that strength, that strength of survival, that strength of being relentless and resilient. They switch from that. And that's grief. That is all grief in a nutshell. And housing can feel like losing the version of yourself that kept you alive and surviving. I'm going to say that again. Housing can feel like losing the version of yourself that kept you alive, right? Yes, that is correct. So while I'm waiting on cousin Kareem to come back, hopefully he'll come back in here. Let's talk about like defining the types of grief that they experience, right? So in these concepts, and with these concepts, like you can even familiar or formalize, formalize these concepts, right? Or they might even be familiar to you. Displacement grief. So displacement grief is the emotional response to being relocated, even when the relocation is beneficial. Okay, I'm gonna say that again. Displacement grief is the emotional response of being relocated, even when the relocation is beneficial. It includes feeling uprooted, missing familiar spaces, struggling to connect with your new surroundings, feeling emotionally unanchored. It's that grief of, I don't recognize where I am. Even if the new place is 100% better, even if it's 100% better, the fact that you're not sleeping on a sleeping bag or sleeping in a tent and you have your own bed, the fact that you might have a TV that you've never had a TV before. The fact that you have a comforter and a pillow, brand new, that smells good. The fact that you have the ability to walk in a bathroom and take a shower when you want to. The fact that when you go to the bathroom, you don't have to go behind a bush. You can actually use a commode. Okay? All of that, again, like we may think that's wonderful for them, that's great, they should be ecstatic, they should be grateful, it's us a plus. But again, they're taken out of their community. It's they miss the familiar space, they struggle to connect with new surroundings, and they feel emotionally unanchored, right? Yeah, that's what it is. And for them, it's a struggle of identity as well, because that's a loss to them. It's losing their identity. They no longer know or understand. It's like, listen, I'm not that person anymore. I like that I used to be. Again, I've said that before in the past, that when we change ourselves, you know, when we change and we grow as we age and mature and we move forward, we ourselves grieve the people that we used to be. Okay. Yeah, we do. We do. You know, like I can tell you, I'll tell you, Auntie Mimosa's in her 50s, right? So do I grieve my teenage self? Sure I do. Do I grieve myself from my 20s? Sure I do. Do I grieve my 30s self? Sure I do. Okay? Because one, it's about the things that I used to be able to do, the amount of energy and activity and Auntie Mimosa used to be able to hang out all night long. Can I hang out all night long now? No, 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 no. No, my bedtime is 10 o'clock, sweeties. And if I do go out at night, I have to take a nap. I got to take a nap first before I go out at night. That's it in a nutshell. I can't do it. Auntie Mimosa can't do it. So imagine if I'm going through that and it's just my life was, it was good. Imagine living on the streets for 10, 15, 20 years and all of a sudden, your city has this wonderful plan or people come to you like, hey, do you want to get off the streets? And you're like, yes, I want to get off the streets. And then they place you in this studio apartment. And now you're like, what do I do now? Who am I now? Because I don't have that stability that I had on the streets for those 10, 15, 20 years is not the same stability in this new location. My community is gone. My family is gone. My predictability, my routine, all of that's gone. Now I have to discover something new, right? And again, it's grief of I don't recognize where I am. They also experience identity loss. Identity loss occurs when major life transitions disrupt the way someone sees themselves. We go through identity loss ourselves on those of us that are quote unquote normal, those of us that have a productive societal lifestyle. We go through identity loss ourselves. Hey, let me see if I can get cousin Kareem back in here. He done text me 15 million times. All right. Let's see, tell him to check his email. Yep. So this is how real we are. This is the hood part, okay? This is the hood part. Yep. Like I said, sometimes we bougie, sometimes we hood. That's the hood part of it, you know. Um that was the hood part of it. I have to stop to have cousin Kareem try to come back in here, send him a new link. But anyway, so identity loss occurs when identity loss occurs when a major life transition disrupt the way someone sees themselves, right? So for someone experiencing homelessness, their identity may include uh, someone who provides street resources, right? They provide street resources, the protector of a group or a certain section. They may be the strong one, the resilient one, right? Housing can remove the context that reinforce that identity. I mean, think about that, right? Housing can remove the context that reinforce that identity of provider of street resources, protector of the group, the strong one, the resilient one. What's going on, cousin Ramon? Cousin Ramon is on Facebook. Hey there, hey. So again, welcome in. If you're just now joining us on Sometimes We Bougie, Sometimes We Hood. Hey, TikTok fam, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Hello, everybody. I'm Auntie Mimosa. Cousin Kareem is in. He's having technical difficulties today. I'm hoping that he's good. He keeps trying to come in here. I'm not sure what's going on, but we're talking about the grief that individuals who are homeless feel, okay, or what they experience. That's what we're talking about today. So right now I'm at the part we're talking about identity loss. And identity loss occurs when a major life transition disrupts the way someone sees themselves. Okay, again, provider of street resources, protector of the group, the strong one, the resilient one. And housing can remove the context that reinforces that identity. Now, cousin Kareem, you were saying some stuff, and unfortunately, it was kind of choppy. Kind of reiterate some of the things you were saying about this topic.
Yeah, I believe that when you come into a situation of homelessness and you get yourself back in the right scope, once you get the housing situated, it's like you have to kind of put yourself back on the right horse to remember what it was like
Mm-hmm.
to have a household. Because what I've seen from people is they just kind of muck through their
Okay.
situation. They just they know that they have a place, but at the same time, it's
Mm-hmm.
like they don't treat it like it's that way, like it's going to continue. It's like they don't want to mentally step back into that place to stay there. They want to just, you know what? I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing before when I was homeless, even though I have a house. You know, I might wash up like 3 times a week instead of all 7 days because I didn't do anything today. And it's a messed up way to get your mind in a state. If
Mm-hmm.
you're not really careful, you can just stay in that. You have to like wash it and rinse and repeat and then move on. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that a lot of people are actually able to do that just because of whatever they dealt with. Like having to get into that mind state of, I can't wash up every day. It's
Mm-hmm.
really a messed up way of thinking.
Right.
But I think that a lot of people, they just, they kind of give up and they accept what is there, what they can't do anymore.
Okay. So do you think, like, for example, like you've heard about how, or you've seen and probably seen this like on some documentaries and some stories like on social media where you have an individual who will pay for a homeless person to get a hotel room for a night or 2 nights so that they can bathe, and get some clean clothes, and they might take them to get a haircut and get them presentable. And you go back, or the individual that's helping the homeless person will go back and find that the homeless person was not sleeping in the bed, that they were sleeping on the floor. They actually made a pallet on the floor versus sleeping in the bed. That has to do
Yeah.
again with that identity, that loss of identity, right? Because and it's not a matter, oh, I've never slept in the bed, so I don't know how to sleep in the bed, or I don't want to sleep in the bed. It probably makes them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, they just go back to what they know the best. And in a lot of instances, that's not, we look at it from a different aspect. We look at it like, yo, if you got a bed, you got a bed. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure where the disconnect is between people having a bed and wanting to use it versus other people who just, I'm more comfortable down here on the ground in my makeshift area. It's like they don't believe that they're going to get out of that situation. And I think that's the horrible part of it is that they don't believe that they can fulfill that necessary need for themselves or accept it from somebody else to the point that they just continue doing what they have to do
Well,
and just
I
to
talked
be
about it
comfortable.
being right, but remember I talked about it being survival mode. That might be their
Yeah.
survival mode for them. Like, yeah, if I get in this bed and I'm too comfortable and something happens, I might sleep too hard. So let me make this pallet on the floor because I know that if I'm on the floor, this is what my body's used to. I might sleep lighter and I have an opportunity to react.
Mm. React to what though? React to like just the change of the area or
Well,
the
no, you
change in
have to
people?
remember. No, like you have to remember now. And I don't know if you were able to hear what I was saying, but when you think about being homeless, right? You're talking
Mhm.
about being in encampments, tent cities, under bridges, on the street. So, they're not sleeping hard. That's not they're not getting a restful sleep. They're always in
Yeah.
survival mode. They're always on go mode. They're always in protection mode. They're always in, I got to be ready to run if the police come, or if, you know what I'm saying, or somebody's
Yeah.
going to hurt me or attack me. I have to always be in go mode. Okay. So thinking about them being in survival mode and go mode all the time, and now all of a sudden you're in a hotel room, or you're in what they call, rapid rehousing or housing. Just because there's a bed, you may not get in. They may not get in it, for the simple fact it may be in their mind that if I get in this bed, I may be really, really comfortable and I'm going to sleep really, really hard, because the body might do that. The body might take them into a deep, heavy sleep for the first time in how many years that they've been on the streets, right?
Yeah, they
And I
don't
mean,
want to
that's
be responsible for that bed either. They don't want to be responsible for the changing of the sheets and all that. They're like, yo, I'm not. Yeah, I think it's a responsibility phase too. I was talking to this. I was in that whole phase like 15 years ago. We're trying to
mm-hmm,
help people, and I remember talking to this one guy. He's like, "Oh, who's gonna wash the sheets after I sleep on them?" And it's like, "Well, you're gonna be clean, so because you're gonna take a shower beforehand, so there's no point in washing the sheets like every day." They're like, "Yeah, but what if I have an accident because I can't get up?" Like kind of like what you were saying.
mm-hmm,
What if I have an accident and I soil the sheets? And they were thinking of like every reason not to get in the bed. And it's just like, it took me like an hour and a half to try to convince them that this is the whole point in doing a hotel stay.
mm-hmm,
Because we're right around the corner from finding you a place. So we just don't have a place yet, but we're right around the corner from getting you your own place.
mm-hmm,
And it was hour and a half of going over repetitive questions, repetitive answers. And it was disheartening
mm-hmm.
to see that they'd rather not enjoy the little bit of comfort because they don't know where it's going to end.
Right, because they're unfamiliar with it. They're
Yeah,
unfamiliar. And it's just like, okay, so let's talk. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And let's take somebody who's in the military, who's been in the military for 30, 40, 50 years, or I won't say 50 years, but let's say take somebody who was in the military for 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years, and they come
yeah,
out. Now, the military that's a different world. That is a completely, completely different world. Let's talk about individuals who are incarcerated. That is a whole different world compared to what's out here in this society
yeah.
world that we live in, right? So now you have to recondition, you have to be reconditioned or recondition yourself to function as a productive citizen, or to function, right? Now, not just as a citizen. And the same thing with being homeless. That's a whole different world. That's a whole different community. And they have to, when you house someone, now you're talking about changing their entire atmosphere. Their identity of who they are is changed. So, like I said, housing can remove the context that reinforced that identity, the identity of who they were, right? Or who they thought they were at that time, who they were at that time of being homeless. So, and then without that support, without the support of case management, without the support of the therapist or a counselor, that's where depression comes in, withdrawal, self sabotage, and returning to the familiar environments. Because sometimes, we even do that, right? We ourselves even return to what we know
Yeah,
because
we're
it's
comfortable.
It's safe and it feels like us. It feels like who we are. It brings back that identity of, oh, I know this identity. I know this person. I know who I am over here, right? It brings that back. It brings them to that. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about before we, get ready to close up out of here. Boy, this is like the fastest hour ever. Jeez, man. Uh, survival grief, right? So survival grief is the emotion. There's going to be a part two to this before I even start this. There's going to be a part 2 and I'm gonna see if I can locate not a homeless person, not one of my individuals, because that's against HIPAA and against company policy. But I'm gonna see if maybe if I could bring in one of my coworkers, like from the outreach team, and provide some deeper insight to this, right? But let's talk about
The
survival.
homelessness.
Yeah, let's talk about survival grief, right? Survival grief is the emotional aftermath of no longer being in crisis mode. Now, that is not just for somebody who's homeless. That is not just for somebody who's homeless. Survival grief, again, I'm going to say this again, survival grief is the emotional aftermath of no longer being in crisis mode. Think about how many times you are in crisis mode. If you have a car accident, you're in crisis mode. If you have an injury, you're in crisis mode. When you have a breakup, you're in crisis mode. When you lose your job, you're in crisis mode. What else is there? If you have a financial setback, you're in crisis mode, right?
You go down the wrong way, you get completely off track of your directions, on the
You're in
highway.
crisis mode. Right. You're in crisis mode. So when someone lives in fight or flight long term, their nervous system adapts to the adrenaline. Okay. Think about trauma. People in trauma, they live in crisis mode. Okay. So, if you live in fight or flight for long term, your nervous system adapts to the adrenaline.
Yeah,
Housing
it's true.
and housing, right? It induces stillness. It makes you stop. Once you're in a home, in a place that you can call home where you feel safe, and then again, a lot of times they don't feel safe. But when you're in a place where you don't have to move around all the time, you're not always running, housing introduces stillness. Stillness can feel uncomfortable. And I said this before, silence can feel very loud, and rest can feel unsafe. And survival grief shows up as restlessness, anxiety, self sabotage, and creating chaos in a stable environment because calm feels unfamiliar.
Mm.
Think about that. Now, I'm switching gears again real quick. Think about somebody who's consistently abused.
Yeah.
That's grief
It
they
can't. Yeah.
right?
You know what I
What?
realized, like, about grief, like you talking about those last two things, is when
Mm-hmm.
you get to the point of where you haven't lived mentally, like you're talking about um somebody who's abused. And when
Mm-hmm.
they get to a point, they leave that abusing person, that person leaves them mostly. It's never that the abused person will ever leave somebody. Like that's like the last stage. But if that
Mm-hmm.
person leaves them and they learn to live on their own, and as they're learning to live on their own, they're learning not to go back to that abusive relationship or into the abusive relationship, but they've lived in that abusive relationship for so long that
Mm-hmm.
they really don't know what it's like not to be
Mm-hmm.
in an abusive relationship. So they they almost, not that they build up that person to want to be in a abusive relationship. It's
Mm-hmm.
like as if they just start doing things that are in that sense and they don't even realize it. And then the only way to really adapt that kind of process is to constantly have somebody nurturing the fact that you don't need to be in that kind of
Mm-hmm.
abusive relationship. And it's a sad state. It's a
It
sad
is.
state of mind that
It is.
somebody can just want to be in that state all the time, but they've never seen the other side of a good relationship. So they just kind of just make their way right back to that same what's familiar and they feel comfortable in it.
And that's
But
the
it's
same,
not.
but that's the same for a homeless person. Think
Yeah.
about it. The same for an individual who is homeless and living on the streets. Okay. And I think, and there's a difference between, like I mentioned earlier about Artists Rock the Mic, which is a nonprofit organization that's ran by Butta B. Rocka. Um, there's a difference between being a homeless college student bouncing from couch to couch to couch to couch while you're earning your degree. Is that difficult? Yes. Are you in survival mode? Yes. There's a difference between that and somebody who's homeless, living under a bridge, living in their car, um, living in encampments, living, on just in and out of the, bathrooms. There is a difference, but either way it goes, homelessness is homelessness. Either way it goes. Okay. And these individuals are consistently in survival mode because they have no idea. Some of them don't know where their next meal is coming from. You have homeless mothers out here with children, homeless fathers out here with children, homeless teens, every
Yeah.
and they're always in survival mode, always in survival mode. So when taken out of that environment, when they come out of that environment of being homeless, it's like, oh my, what do I do now? Who am I now?
Yeah.
And not only do they experience that, other people, just general people in general, some experience that identity loss or that grief of identity when their life shifts and changes. So, in closing, before we end today, I want to speak directly to the person, and they may not be watching. They may be watching, may not be watching. Who knows? Somebody may bring this up, or later on. But I want to speak directly to the person sitting in an apartment or studio, or that still feel, or house or home, whatever, a room, and that does not feel like theirs. Okay. To the person who thought the key would fix everything. To the person who feels guilty for missing the streets. To the person who feels alone in a space they prayed for. I want you to hear this clearly. Hear this clearly. Okay. There's nothing wrong with you. You are not ungrateful. You are not broken. You are transitioning. And transitioning always carries grief. You can be thankful for housing and still grieve what you left behind. You can appreciate stability and still feel lonely in the silence. You can be indoors and still feel displaced. Housing is a structural solution. Home is an emotional experience. And an emotional experience takes time. So if you miss your street family, that doesn't mean you want to be, or you want homelessness back, or you want to be back homeless. It means you value the connection. If silence feels loud, it doesn't mean you're unstable. It means your nervous system is adjusting. If you feel pressure to succeed, to prove you deserve housing, to never struggle again, take a breath. You don't have to perform stability. You're allowed to adjust slowly. You're allowed to feel unfamiliar inside your own walls. You are allowed to grieve the version of you that survived outside. That version of you was strong, alert, protective, resourceful. That version of you kept you alive. But now you are learning how to live, and that requires a different kind of strength. To the case managers, to the therapists, to the outreach workers, to the landlords trying and property managers trying to understand. When someone struggles after getting housed, pause before calling it resistance. Ask yourself, what might they be grieving? Because sometimes it's not about non compliance, it's loss. Sometimes it's not failure, it's adjustment. Sometimes it's not ingratitude, it's loneliness. And when we respond, and I say we because I put myself in there, when we respond with compassion instead of punishment, housing has a chance to become a home for these individuals. If you're
Yeah.
newly housed and listening, start small. Put one thing on the wall, cook one meal, invite one person over if your home or housing situation allows visitors. Name your space, play music, open the windows, let the fresh air in, claim it as yours. Home is not built in a day, it's layered, it's practiced, it's inhabited, and most important, it is felt. You survive
Yeah.
the streets, you can survive stillness. And one day, that silence that feels loud right now will begin to feel like peace. You are not alone in this transition. Your grief is valid, your adjustment is human, and your stability is forming. One step at a time, one layer at a time. And we will keep having these conversations until housing is just not placement, but belonging. So until next time, be gentle with yourself. Stability is a journey, and you are becoming still becoming. So, in this conversation is dedicated to people whose names will never appear in housing reports, but those whose stories matter. To the men and women who survived under bridges, in tents, in shelters, in cars. To the ones who finally received keys but still sit on the edge of their bed at night wondering why they don't feel settled in yet. To the ones who miss their street family and feel ashamed to admit it. To the ones trying so hard to mess this up. Because grief has taught me something powerful, as it always does. It's taught me that love doesn't disappear just because the environment changes.
Yeah. That's true. That's a good one to hold on to.
Okay? Love doesn't disappear just because the environment changes. And stability doesn't mean the ache is gone. Grief is proof that something mattered. And whether you are grieving a person, a place, or a version of yourself, it all deserves space. It all deserves space. So if today's episode resonated with you, we would love to hear from you. And of course, please like, share, comment, subscribe
Well,
to all of our social
tell
media.
you
So,
this much. There's
yes.
a lot that needs to be thought about.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and this
There's a lot
conversation,
that needs to be thought about.
yes. And this conversation is far from over. Like I said, there might be a part two and a part three to this, especially in the fact talking about homelessness, you know. Um, and as a caregiver, as a case manager, I I work in the trenches with these individuals. I work with them every single day. Whether and then let's not talk about the gamut of the personalities, not just the personalities, but the the levels of whether or not it's a veteran with PTSD, an individual with mental illness, regardless of, if it's schizophrenia and whatever the mental illness is, whether they're substance abuse. I'm with these people every single day. Every day. Monday through Friday. I ain't gonna say every day. I'm with these people Monday through Friday. Okay? Monday through Friday. 8 hours a day. Talking to them so they can feel comfortable in their homes. But again, if this episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear from you. Again, you can reach us on Instagram at Queen of Life Empowerment, or Sometimes We Bougie, Sometimes We Hood Grief Podcast. On Facebook, Sometimes We Bougie, Sometimes We Hood. On TikTok, Sometimes Bougie, Sometimes Hood. And on YouTube at Sometimes We're Bougie, Sometimes We Hood. Remember, on the social media, please like, follow, share, subscribe. There's no subscription for anything. Everything is free at this moment. And if you want to be a guest on this show, please join us. Email me or email us, Cousin Kareem and Auntie Mimosa. Please email us at sometimeswe'rebougie, sometimes hood at gmail.com. Sometimes bougie, sometimes hood at gmail.com. All right. And your story matters here. Your story matters here. We don't have to walk this road alone, and you don't have to walk this road alone in silence. Take gentle care of yourself. You carry the most beautiful love there is. And even in transition, it's your love, your light still matters. Until next time. And remember, we are on every Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Y'all have a great one. See you next Sunday.
Enjoy. Okay.
It's a podcast dedicated to exploring the complex emotions of loss, the road to healing, and the strength found in remembering.